Hey everyone, this is Dylan Moore with the Volitional Science Network. I wanted to do a video today about narcissists. I've had a few conversations recently about people who have been having problems with usually a specific person in the life. It's usually a parent, but it's not always the case. And I began to notice that these people had very specific problems, again, usually with a parent, that were very, very similar to the problems that I had with one of my parents. And some time ago, may have been a year or two ago now, I stumbled across an article on narcissistic parents, and my mind was so blown away because point by point through the article, I felt like it was just writing about my mother. Like, you know, someone did a reality TV show of my mom and followed her around and was like, okay, Dylan's mom does this, and then here are the things that she does. Well, it turns out that narcissism, which is something I didn't realize had a clinical definition. I always thought that a narcissist, or calling someone a narcissist, was just a name that you threw out when you didn't like someone because they were maybe a little more into themselves, either physically or you know, with their own creations or whatever. But a narcissist is a strict personality disorder it's actually so common that when people write articles about it and you read that article and you have a narcissist in your life, you think that article was written specifically for you. Little bit of irony there. You think that article was written specifically for you about the person that you're having the problem with. And when I was speaking with these people who were complaining, and I realized what they were describing was a narcissist in their life, I simply started repeating bullet points I remember from the article I had read, or I had read more articles by then, and you know, emphasizing my own stories because I have my own history with it. And the person's eyes get like this wide and they're like, how do you know so much about my dad? Or how do you know so much about my mom? And it's because, well, excuse me, the disorder is so predictable, it's boring. So what I wanted to do is someone, like I said, who's had to deal with a narcissist in his life, I wanted to give some practical advice for, first of all, identifying a narcissist. I'm going to go through a few points here in a second, a few examples from my life, and a bit of understanding of how they operate, because I think I can boil it down with a simple analogy. And for this, I'm going to be focusing on parents, my mom being the example here. Because I think most people who have a problem with a narcissist in their life, it is a parent, and particularly when it is a parent, it's the worst form because there's no way to run away. Like, if you meet a narcissist who's we'll even say not family, you know, someone that you aren't necessarily stuck with because of your birth, you do have the option of getting away. Of course, the narcissist is going to work to convince you otherwise. But I feel that aiming this for people with narcissistic parents is going to ring true for more people than less. So I want to give a few points here. And let's see, I've written down 9 of them. And if these start freaking you out because it sounds like I'm exactly describing the person that you're having a problem with, it's because it's as clear as day once you figure out what's going on. So the first thing about a narcissist is that they're the center of the world. Everything is about them. The most important thing, and what this means is that any behavior or any attitude or any opinion that you have that doesn't match perfectly with the will of the narcissist, this is considered rebellion. in the view of the narcissist, and they feel justified in attacking you, whether that attack comes in the form of like actual physical punishments or guilt trips or something even sneakier, because narcissists are great at being sneaky. They will feel 100% justified in doing that, and you can't call them on it, because an interesting thing about being the center of the world, or about being at the center of the universe, is that when you tell someone who's the center of the universe that, hey, you're the center of the universe, they're like, well, yeah, it's pretty great. Now do what I want. The second point I have here is that you have no privacy. Now, because the narcissist is the center of the world, you are just an extension of their will. And because you're just an extension of their will, you can't have any boundaries. So privacy doesn't exist. So, I went through this a lot growing up, particularly in my bedroom, in that my mother never gave me any warning before entering my room. She wouldn't knock. She wouldn't even like announce herself. It was almost like she got a kick out of how fast she could open the door and see what I was doing before I noticed that she was, coming into the room. And it was the same thing with the bathroom. Well, actually, only go back to the bedroom. I remember I would change my clothes when I had to get naked. I would change my clothes behind my door, so if the door opened and she came in and looked inside, I would actually be behind the door, and I could say something like, I'm changing my clothes. Like, give me a second, because I knew I wouldn't have enough time to, cover myself if it wasn't the case. And this wasn't just like being a child. This extended all the way into teenage years. And until I left the house, it was just open the door and I'm like, what are you doing? And to emphasize this, I actually suggested to my mother a few times that, could you maybe knock? And going back to any opinion or desire that you have that's outside of the narcissist's will is punishable, she would lose her shit if I suggested that. It would just be like this crazy scream house if I tried that. And there was even one day I accidentally locked my bedroom door because the doorknob on my door had a little button that you would push to lock it, and then simply turning it would unlock it. And so when I closed it, I touched it like this, and I activated the door lock. And so a little while later, she came in to open the door and found that it was locked. And again, I didn't mean to lock it because I knew what would happen, and she damn near beat the fucking door down before I could scramble over and open it, and then proceeded to yell at me like, what the hell are you thinking? And there's no excuse. This is an interesting thing. I didn't write this one down. Is that if you do an accident like that, your explanation is irrelevant. The emotion that the narcissist has created, like, I'm angry at you because you haven't done what my will is. And it turns out that wasn't the case. Like, it was literally an accident that I locked the door. Doesn't matter. She's justified in what she's doing, and you deserve to be punished because the act is already done. And by act, I mean what she's decided the act was. The third point I have, and this is the one. When I tell the example, I think you'll be horrified. Everybody I've told this example to is horrified. But you owe the narcissist. The narcissist has sacrificed everything about their life for you. And they will call that debt due for any little thing that they need. I mean, this is the guilt trip. They will use that guilt trip for any little whim that they want. So, I was a cesarean section baby, which means they had to cut my mom's belly open when I was born. I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, so luckily I'm alive. And my mom's has this big, I keep pointing at my belly, big scar right down her belly to this day. And I don't know how often I heard this. I wouldn't be able to say like it was once a week, but it was often enough that like the echo of the voice is still bouncing around in my mind. is if she wanted me to do something and I was reluctant to do it. And when I say do something, this could be something like get me some ice cream because I'm in bed, or tell me that you love me, which I didn't because she was this crazy, insane, demonic banshee making my life hell. She would say, do I need to show you my cesarean section scar to get you to do whatever? Oh, even the voice hurts me. Yeah, so she would say, do I need to show you my cesarean section scar to get you to do whatever the thing was? So the point was, because she sacrificed the integrity of her body to give birth to me, I was permanently in debt to her. Permanently. And, it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I finally had to tell her to shove it, because it was another, like, we got, I remember stuff as I tell these. I got in a fight with her over Skype. I was living in Europe, and she said something that really pissed me off. Again, it was something about how she's the center of the universe, and I did this weird thing that, what was just so awful, and she had nothing to do with it, and I called her out on it, and I got angry at her, and I yelled at her, and instead of addressing what I said, she said, do you love me? And in the past, I had to say yes, or else I'd get punished, but, I mean, it's hard to get me when I'm in Europe, right? And I crossed my arms, we had the video, and I said, I'm not going to answer that. And I saw on the fucking Skype video, I saw her lift up her shirt, and she started saying, "Do I need to show you my cesarean section scar to get you to say that you love me?" And pat myself on the back. That was the first time I said, "Yeah, show me," because I'm still not going to say it. Point number 4. Your wants, or even your basic needs, are completely irrelevant to the narcissist's whims. And I remember growing up that, like, anytime I vaguely even thought of myself and said it, or if she even picked up that I was thinking about myself, it was just like this explosion that would occur where she would just be like, what makes you think that you deserve that? And I'm talking like clothes, I'm talking, hygiene, food preferences. There was this one time where I was really young, and this sounds silly until you get into a narcissist's head. It's like, why are you so upset about this? But I think you could see, when you just compare it to these other examples I'm giving, why it was so intense. Is she came to me before dinner. She was cooking dinner. Again, I was like 5. And she said, do you want peas or do you want carrots for dinner? For your vegetable? And I'm like, well, I'm thinking, I like carrots more than I like peas. So I said, carrots. And she goes, well, you're getting peas. And she walked back into the kitchen. And I was like, what the fuck did you ask me for? I mean, it's like, okay, so you already, I assume, maybe she didn't, because obviously she didn't care about what I liked and didn't like. I assume that she knew that I didn't like peas, and so I figured the punishment would have been bad enough just to force me to eat peas in the first place, because she knew I didn't like it. But to ask me first so I can be denied my request, that's getting your entertainment right there, man. And by the time I became a teenager, my voice started getting deeper, and I'm getting hairy, and actually not that, I'm still not very hairy. Like 3 hairs coming out or whatever. I need to shave them. I was terrified of letting my mom know that I was reaching puberty and becoming an adult. And I think the reason was, and I read about this, is that the narcissistic parent will fight you over it. Because becoming an adult includes becoming independent, and they don't want you to have your independence, so they don't want you to show any sign of becoming an adult. So I remember I would keep my voice high, and I think I still have a problem with this. When I get excited, my voice goes up, even though I have a pretty deep voice. Even my Adam's apple I got this really big Adam's apple. Once I got it, I would walk around like this to try to hide it, and my posture was slumped over. And you can't have a good posture because that suggests confidence. And nothing a narcissist can't stand that's confidence if that confidence suggests they might do something against you or go against your will. The fifth thing I have is that the narcissist must always be the center of attention. And this is to the point where you don't accomplish anything unless the narcissist can take credit for it. This is interesting. So, this sounds again like the peas and carrots things. This sounds a little benign until you again look into the psychology of what's going on. But anytime I would go out and do something extracurricular or even academic, because I was pretty good in school, she would always say, "Make mama proud." It wasn't make yourself proud or do a good job. It was make me proud. And it served me a little bit, but because I never wanted her to be there. But particularly for my extracurricular activities, she never showed up. Ever. I mean, in band, in sports, in my martial arts, she never showed up. And I think it was because she simply didn't see any interest to her. Like, it doesn't matter what you're accomplishing. What matters is what it does for me, and it doesn't do anything, so see ya. On the flip side of that, nothing is ever the narcissist's fault. Sorry, the pause came from me remembering the story that I'm about to tell. It's your fault. Everything's your fault. Anything negative, right? If it's an accomplishment, they take credit, but if it's something negative, it's your fault. So this story goes, when I was 11, I was in 5th grade, my mom took me to Disneyland with my cousin and my aunt, his mom, who was her sister-in-law. And one of the things that my mom always liked to say to me, this goes back to your wants or your needs are irrelevant, is if I ever asked for something, often she would look at me and go, "Well, why don't you get down on your knees and beg?" I guess that's funny. And my cousin, who was 4 at the time, so I'm 7 years older, I was 11, he was 4. When he needed something, my mom would say this to him, because apparently it's funny. And looking back, I could see how my aunt would have gotten very upset at this. And I think it was the morning that we were going to come back home from Disneyland. We were sitting at breakfast at the hotel, and I think I asked for something at the table I couldn't reach. And my aunt, to her detriment, because she shouldn't have taken it out on me, although I understand where she was coming from, she looked at me and she goes, "Well, Dylan, why don't you get down on your knees and beg?" The typical woman thing. The attack was aimed at my mom, even though I was the casualty. Well, needless to say, there was something of a cat fight that ended up in a nuclear explosion where my aunt took her son and literally paid for a different airplane or air flight so she didn't have to sit next to us on the plane. And we had 2 different hotel rooms, and my mom was freaking out. She was yelling and screaming, and I'm just like, World War I style, just trying to keep my head down for the bullets flying around everywhere. And at some point, God, I remember this. She looked at me and she said, "Dylan, your aunt is angry at you. You apologize." And I'm like, what the fuck did I do? I was just asked for something, and what? And I'm like, I don't want to apologize. And she sat there and screamed at me and made me go apologize. And I remember tears coming down my face. I went down the hallway. My aunt's walking away with the cousin. I'm like, "Aunt, I'm sorry." And she just looked at me like, "Huh?" I'm sure she was like, "Why the fuck is this kid apologizing?" Right? And walked off. So, nothing is ever their fault. It's your fault. The next one was, and I think this one will be obvious from the stories I've said so far, the next story is up there with the cesarean section scar story. So the narcissist will demean you and make you feel inferior as much as they possibly can because they have to retain that dominance over you and remind you that you are not independent in any sense beyond their will. So, whenever I got in trouble, which was any random fucking thing that went through her head that I needed to be punished for. Not random. I'll tell you why it's not random in a bit. Anything that went against her will that I needed to be punished for. She would make me stand there, put my, like stand at attention, and tell me why I screwed everything up and everything that I had to do. And before I was able to leave, she said, "Okay, now say, 'Yes, mommy dearest, I will honor and obey.'" Verbatim, that's literally what I had to say. "Yes, mommy dearest, I will honor and obey." And now I grew up thinking that this was some twisted way for her just to grind it into me, just to remind me that I have absolutely no value in my own decision making capacity. And I remember there was one night, I don't know how old I was. I could have been 9 or 12. Preteen. I was preteen. And I heard her scream across the house, "Dylan!" She did that all the time. I always had to be listening because if I didn't show up instantly, it was punishment material. And I show up to the front room because she's watching this movie. She's like, "Dylan, watch this movie. Watch this movie." The movie's called Mommy Dearest. And I'm like, "What? You mean that thing that you always make me say?" The movie, if you haven't heard of it, don't fucking watch it. Please. If you haven't already. It's about a woman who's clearly narcissistic from any stretch of the imagination for the bullet points I've given here. Who, straps her children into bed at night, and so they can't get out of bed until she unstraps them in the morning, freaks out and beats them if they use wire coat hangers, and is generally insane. And one of the things that she makes the children do is say, "Yes, mommy dearest." I don't remember if they said, "I will honor and obey." That may have been something my mom added later. Doesn't matter. My mom, it was like she idolized this woman. She was just laughing and being like, "Oh my God, I love this movie." And I'm like, okay, so this whole time I thought you had used your imagination to come up with a cruel punishment for me. You weren't even being original. To you the whole time it was a joke. Like this ultimate humiliation tactic used against me was just like this funny fucking joke. Ugh. God. Yeah, so you're inferior, and not only that, this one just popped back into my head. You will be gotten rid of, or this is what's told to you. You will be gotten rid of it as soon as you no longer serve the narcissist. Which, my mother always used, if I was doing something she didn't like, it was very common that she would threaten to send me to military school, and she would even get up and march around the room and be like, "You're gonna go to military school, ha!" Which, I guess some asshole could say, well, she was joking. Well, it's hard to get a joke when you're 7. And for a kid, that's a real thing to be like, "Oh my God, they're gonna fucking kick me out and I'm gonna die if I get kicked out, so I better do what they say." And that was always a thing. If you don't serve me, if you don't follow the rules that I want you to follow, you're fucking out of there. And then speaking of rules, here's what I have for number 8. The narcissist, am I close enough to this thing? The narcissist will hold conflicting viewpoints in order to have an excuse to get you to do something. And what I mean by that is they'll hold a conflicting set of rules. So depending on what reason that they need to come up with to get you to do something, because they have an opposite set of rules, that they can apply anything to you. For example, if my mom wanted something her way, and in the household it was just me and my stepdad, so it was her and 2 men. If my mom wanted something her way, all men were stupid and controlling. But if she wanted my stepdad to do something, men were responsible to be providers of the household. So at one end, she had this feminist mindset. On the other hand, she had this traditional Christian wife mindset. And depending on what she needed, she would just draw from one or the other. Another example is if she wanted to come up with a rule to punish me. And often there was this constant battle because all I wanted to do as a child was play video games, and probably because I needed to escape the fucking hell that I was in. I would always play RPGs and get, stuck in the story, and I read fantasy books to sci-fi to get myself away. So it was always this constant battle of that I can't play video games or often read books. And if she wanted to make a rule to punish me, which was usually take one of these things away, it was her house, her rules. But if she needed something done around the house, now it was our house, and we all live here as a family. We all need to contribute to what's going on. So, and of course, when someone holds a conflicting set of rules, if you try to pin them down on something, it doesn't matter. They can just shapeshift. And the last one I have, and this is not what's the word I want? All inclusive. I picked some of my favorite points from the stuff that could jog my memory when I was reading different articles. So go read some articles just to get a better idea about this. But the narcissist is always looking for intelligence to use against you. So because it's important that you're never comfortable, because if you're comfortable, you might get a sense of independence that you can make decisions. And you need a constant reminder that you are inferior and not in control. They're always prying and looking for stuff. Even if they don't use it right now, they can use it later. And one of the things my mom would do is she would rifle through my room. And any thing you've written down, any letter that you've received from somebody else, anything that you're storing, the narcissist will read it all and be like, why, I found evidence that you were doing X. Now, whether or not you were actually doing X, as I said before, at that point, doesn't matter because they've convinced that you are doing it and that you need to be punished for it. And again, in my case, often it was books and video games. Of course, this is when the Christian in her would come out, and you guys remember this shit? Satan gets into little children's minds, or into teenagers' minds by media like video games and books. No, they get in through their narcissistic, crazy, insane fucking parents. But I digress. I got to the point with my bedroom, because that was the vague safe haven I had in the house, is everything would be perfectly organized in such a way that nothing made her think to investigate further. I mean, it could be something simple like as a pen, where if I wrote something and I put my pen down without putting it back, and she came into my room, whether I was there or not, often it was when I wasn't there, because again, I have no boundaries and she needs intelligence. That pen could say, aha, Dylan was writing something. I wonder if he put it in his desk. I wonder if he hid it somewhere. Maybe I need to go look. So before leaving my room, I would say, I need to put this pen back where it's not obvious that I did anything with it, so nothing trips her to look further. And I became so good at my lies, because one of the things, particularly when I went to my dad's house, because I went there every other weekend, or if I went to a friend's house, I would get this laundry list of things that I was supposed to do and not do. And it didn't take me long to figure out that I just had to ignore it, or else I would just, rip myself apart. I needed an outlet somewhere. And so when I came back, or as I was coming back, I would start developing what I call a lie tree, where I knew pretty well what question she was going to ask me, and that she was going to pry to see if she can get me on something. And I would say, okay, when I first get there, she's going to ask me, first of all, what I did, and I'm going to have an answer for that. And that answer, she's going to pry a little more, because she's going to be like, well, is he lying, or is he leaving something out? And I would have this tree of answers to questions already figured out, and my goal was to make this tree big enough that she would lose interest in trying to pry negative information out of me. So my whole life was spent like that. It was just like, how can I control evidence so there's no reason to get me? It's a sucky state of affairs, I gotta tell you. So those were the 9 points that I picked out. Like I said, this is by no means all-inclusive, and I encourage you to go read more about narcissists, because they are a very dangerous breed of cat. Again, I know I focused on the child-parent relationship. There's other narcissists out there, and what they'll do is they'll turn it into a parent-child relationship. Well, they will get you... I'm going to use the word addicted. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I'm going to use the word addicted. They're going to get you addicted to them, where you come to them for punishment. You come to them because you've done wrong, and you have to make up for it. You owe them. You're inferior to them. And anyone who doesn't play that game with them, they just don't have in their life. They just move them out. And so they'll surround themselves with people who feed into that constant, like, oh, the world's about me, the universe is about me, everybody else is inferior. No self-reflection. They're incapable of self-reflection because I think the whole mirror would simply just shatter. Again, when I read about this, I gave these points, and these examples, but I got these points from reading these articles, and they were just like, I'm like, oh, I got an example for that, and I got an example for that, I got an example for that, exactly like my mom. So, I realized one day, and this was after other people had been talking to me about their narcissist problems, that the reason that people keep having these narcissist problems, of course the narcissist is a problem, but the relationship issue, the complaint that I've heard, and this complaint came from me as well, is that the narcissist's behavior appears erratic and random, where I thought I was following the rules that were laid out before, and suddenly, bam, they changed, and now I'm in trouble again, and I don't know what happened. Yesterday, we were having a nice rational discourse, and I thought the relationship was going to get better, but now today, I'm continuing that rational discourse, and boom, it exploded, and now she, threatening to take things away from me and giving me guilt trips, and what the hell's going on? Here's the deal. Is that the narcissist is rational, is friendly, is good-natured, as long as they're getting their way. The instant they feel that they're not getting their way anymore, remember, because they're the center of the universe, they're God, essentially. Everything's about them, everything's there for them. And if you go against the divine will of God, obviously you deserve punishment. And so if they have to invoke physical punishment, whether that's beatings or taking things away from you or literally stealing stuff from you. My mom, I think she didn't. No, I kept a pretty good track of my money. She wouldn't outright just come physically take my money, but she always had some, as soon as she figured out that I had saved up any money, or from birthdays or Christmases, she always had some really good reason why it belonged to her. And once she decided that, there's nothing I could do about it. They'll use emotional attacks on you, whether that's guilt trip, taking back promises, claiming that they're unloved. They'll use reason, because there's always a good reason to do what they want. Always a good reason to do what they want. And they'll even use moral arguments where, what they want is simply the right thing to do. Any of these, they will bounce it around and they will, it's like a poker hand that they have, and they will throw any card down that poker's not a good example. Pinochle. Anybody play Pinochle? It's like a card game where they will throw down any card that they think will manipulate you into doing what they want. And they have no shame about it. You can't call them on it because, like I said, if you call them on it and say, hey, you're acting like you're the center of the universe, they're going to be like, well, yeah, I am the center of the universe, so. The reason that they appear erratic is because you're not thinking like them. Non-narcissists, and I'm not saying that there's this clear line between a narcissist and not a narcissist. There's other problems that we all have and other clinical issues. How many of these points that I brought up fit into the definition of a psychopath or a sociopath? The narcissist sees things in one dimension. And that's whether or not, are they being served or not they being served? And to demonstrate this, I want to use an analogy. So, imagine you have a big dog. He loves you. And it's a big dog, like a Rottweiler. Scary dogs, but they'll love you, and they'll be your loving, faithful friend. And it's eating time in the morning. It's time for dog food. And you got like one of those big ass bowls of dog food because your dog weighs 150. Rottweiler doesn't weigh that much, but your dog's big. And you're pouring it, and the dog's like bumping into you, and you can barely stand still, and he's jumping up on the counter, and you're trying to keep the dog down. And you bring the bowl over to the kitchen, and he's like jumping up on your arm, and you put it down, and you can't even get your hands away before its face is in the bowl, and it's just like, and it's pushing the bowl around the kitchen, and like kibble bits are flying everywhere. Even if that was your most loving, faithful friend that would die for you and kill people for you if they thought you were threatened, what would happen if you tried to take that food bowl away before it was finished? Again, the dog's like, man, that thing will bite you so fast it'll rip your arm off. Doesn't matter. And the narcissist is like that dog. All it sees is his food bowl. And all it sees from other people is the food bowl coming toward me, or is the food bowl going away? And to everybody else who's saying like, well, okay, there's the food bowl, and then there's how I feel about things, and then there's the right thing to do, and then here's this, relationship I have, and I gotta make sense of things. We're dealing with all these different variables. All they're dealing with is the food bowl. And they can fake the variables. Right? They can fake all that other shit in order to get you to get that food bowl back in front of their face. It's all about that food bowl back in front of the face. And if the person interacting with the narcissist, the one with the problem relationship in their life, going, I can't understand what's going on because one day she's rational, one day she's good-natured, one day she makes sense, and the next day, I wanted to bring up this problem that I've had, and she fucking exploded. I don't know what's going on. Because you brought up the problem. That was taking the food bowl away. That was saying you are no longer the center of the universe. Narcissists need to be seen as like these monsters that only consist of a stomach. All they do is devour. And there's nothing to fix them. Nothing we know of anyway. From what I've understood. So, like I said, if you try to fix them, if you try to say, hey, you're acting like you're the center of the universe and nobody likes that, it's like, well, first of all, why do I care what anybody else likes or doesn't like? And second of all, I am the center of the universe, so what's your fucking point? If you try to take them to therapy, this blew my mind. They get worse. They get worse because during therapy, all they do is get better at psychology. The therapist is saying, well, people feel like this and they'll behave like that if you do these things. And they're just going, oh, man. Shit. I gotta write that one down. I'm gonna use that against whoever. It just makes them worse. So, the question becomes, and this part sucks, by the way. The question becomes, what do you do if you have a narcissist in your life? And I had already done one of these before I had read the article that had these suggestions, but the first one is you must completely remove the narcissist from your life. There's nothing you can do to change the narcissist, and anytime that the narcissist feels, is becoming more good-natured and more reasonable, it's just a trap. It's good-natured bait, but it's still bait. And if you remove them from life, you have to be complete about it. You have to block them on your phone and your social media and you can't talk to them because they will use any hook or card or trick that they can to bring you back in and get that food bowl in front of their face. The second one, and that's the one I did, by the way. The second one is the second one is, if you do choose to meet this person, first of all, limit your interaction, so you don't have to meet as much as you were previously, but agree with everything that they say. The whole time that they're, yep, you're right, I'll do this, yeah, you said I should do that, I'm totally gonna do that, everything. And then as soon as they leave, just go back to whatever you were doing. I'm guessing the reason why that works is because while the narcissist is around you, part of the thing that they need is your subservience to them. And whether or not you actually do the stuff that they said that you need to do later, the fact that you were subservient to them in the moment is what's getting them off. So I think that's what keeps them at bay. So I wanted to add something else to the end of this. Because for as much time as I took explaining what a narcissist is and giving the dog example and stuff, the solutions are pretty sad. Either get rid of them or just, do this thing where you agree with them and then forget about them as soon as they go. I wanted to talk about justice because in my own life, I've thought about this a lot. I've fantasized about what justice would look like between me and my narcissistic relationship, my mother. And that fantasy is, it's drifted from being able to defend myself physically because there was physical violence involved with what I mean. Her voice was so horrible. I often remember thinking as a child, I would rather you hit me than scream at me. But there was physical violence involved, and I fantasize about being able to defend myself. I fantasize about being able to speak over her. I fantasize about beating her at arguments, and I fantasize about being right when she's wrong. And it's rough because none of that will do anything. None of that will change the situation. None of that will change her. None of that will fill the gaping abyss of the past. So, for people who aren't your parent, for narcissists that you might have in your life who's not a parent, I really don't know. I mean, after getting the person out of your life, that's the solution. In terms of justice, what do you do about this person who's fucking ruined you? For people who aren't your family or people who aren't your parent, the only thing I can think of is warn others. Warn others to stay away. Just try to limit their food. Try to limit the narcissist's food. But for justice with your parent or some other close family member, I think the thing that needs to be communicated on a social level, because between you and the parent, this small thing, is take away their grandchildren. My mother will never see my kids. I mean, unless they become old enough and they decide, well, I want to go meet grandma after my warnings not to do so. My mother will never see my kids. Because if she were to treat them with 1/100th the way she treated me, I would consider that child abuse. And I don't need her toxic bullshit, first of all, in my life. But the least I can do for my children is, okay, I had to spend all this time and energy getting over this. I want to give you the head start where you don't have to deal with this. The justice is in the narcissistic parent, first of all, knowing that they will never, ever get to experience and see their grandchildren grow up. The second one, or the other thing, is I want the social understanding, I want the social phenomenon to be that if you really, really treat your kids like shit, even if, like, to get this through the narcissist's head, if you really treat your kids like shit, the social repercussion of that is you don't get to see your grandkids. Not all this, oh, your parents did the best job that they could, oh, your mom always loves you no matter what. No, that's bullshit. You were used and devoured. You were nothing but food. Because everybody is nothing but food. But you had, and again, I'm focusing on the parent here, but you as the food for the parent, you were the one person that couldn't run away from that parent. You were like the sole undefended thing for their wicked cutlery and slobbering jowls. I hope some of you might find this useful. I think this is some pretty important information to have out there. I mean, simply seeing from like reading the article, thinking that I was reading about my own mother, and then when I talked about points that I read about the article to somebody else, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're talking about my dad." It's that common, and also knowing. I mean, the solutions are important, but understanding what's going through the head, the food thing, the dog with the food is that's the metric that's going on, and that will help you understand why the behavior seems so erratic. So, if you do have a narcissist in your life, I'm really sorry to hear that, and I really encourage you to read more articles. Just Google search it; you'll find articles and resources everywhere. And feel free to contact me and email me and tell me your stories. It's rough, and if someone needs to talk about it, I'm happy to talk to them about it. So, with that, again, I wish you good luck, and thanks for watching.